Welcome back to our show. Lucky enough today to have Geoff Lakman with us, the owner of Lakeshore Corporation, a company that acquires, develops, and redevelops and manages properties throughout the Pacific Northwest. Geoff, how are you, buddy?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
I feel like I haven't seen you for a while.
I know. I've been avoiding you.
You've been avoiding me, man. That is not a very nice thing to hear in the afternoon. Well, Geoff, luckily we reeled you in somehow. Must have been some of those brownies we were cooking. You finally decided to come back to the show.
Heather did say she had some brownies. So.
That's why she's not joining us right now. She's over there giggling. It's all coming together. Geoff, so let's just talk about this a little bit because a lot of people in the current real estate environment are trying to figure out maybe they want to buy real estate with rents up and prices up and mortgage rates so low. But being a first-time landlord isn't quite as easy as maybe people think, is it?
No, I think it's just like anything. There's hundreds of things to know about being a landlord, and sometimes you'll get lucky and you'll rent your property out and nothing will happen. And other times you won't be so lucky and you'll have the worst experience and you'll never want to do it again. But it's just, I think the first step, just like anything, is knowing the rules of the game. And the number one thing that I would say, the first tip that I would give somebody is knowing the laws. And Washington has a Landlord-Tenant Act that is really easily accessible. You can go online, type it in, and it's easy to read. It's not a ton of legalese, so it's easy to interpret, and you kind of know what the rules of the game are before you go out and even start thinking about renting your property out.
Are there a lot of rules?
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
If you printed it out, it's probably 50 pages.
So we're actually and 50 pages is a lot.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was just having a conversation the other day about like the amount of mortgage paperwork there is.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, the more paperwork you put, every other new page of paperwork you put in, every single document becomes less impactful. And so I don't know if it's kind of that same way. I mean, are there big laws that people really need to know? And are there some that are less impactful, or all 50 of equal importance? 50 pages, not 50 laws. I mean,
There's quite a few things that have to do with timelines. So if your tenant isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, you can't just force them out. You have to follow certain procedures. And if you don't have those timelines correct, you have to start the process over again. So it can really delay things and cost you a lot of money. And the difference, when you're renting a property out, your property, every single day that you're not getting rent, it's costing you money. So if the property's vacant, there's a per day charge that you're missing on rent. If your tenant's not paying, there's a per day charge that you're not getting. And so it's really important to act quickly when there's problems, and to know how to act quickly, know what you're supposed to do, what the procedures are.
Okay, so with all of these procedures, is that really understanding these? Is that kind of that first step in really getting a home ready to rent, is understanding what it's going to take to be within the law when you rent that house?
I think that's the first step, or understanding if you even want to be a landlord, because maybe you read through the rules and what the requirements are.
Page 9 and you're like, 41 more pages is a lot.
Well, a lot of our clients that we work with are landlords by default. They've inherited the property, they went through a divorce, they are short selling their house, and they've moved out to an apartment during that process, and it maybe hasn't sold. They decide to rent it out. So they don't go out there seeking out to be an investor, and so they don't even think about looking up what the laws are and understanding what it takes to be a landlord. And once they find out what their responsibilities are, it can be kind of really frustrating for a lot of them. We had a gentleman the other day that was upset that his garbage disposal broke, and he thought the tenant he thought the tenant broke the garbage disposal, and the tenant said, no, I didn't. And they had this conflict, and really the landlord was, he had to replace it.
Doesn't really matter who broke it.
No, it is an appliance. It was working, and it just stopped working. So, he wasn't too happy about that.
So I mean, it's kind of those type of things. Sometimes being a landlord can feel sexy. Yeah, I got a couple rentals, Mm-hmm. But then there's these pieces of a home, whether it's through maintenance, whether it's through people not paying rent, all these different items that can really, I guess, suck the sexiness out of being a landlord and really make it much harder than people think.
Yeah, it can be extremely difficult. And especially if you're home, if you pick a property that needs a lot of repair, has a lot of deferred maintenance, those are things that you want to take care of. And that's another thing. You want to take a look at the home that you're going to be renting, or maybe it's an apartment building, and see what work needs to be done and put together a maintenance plan, just routine maintenance, and then items that actually need to be taken care of before you can rent that property out.
So then, if you've determined that this is something you want to do, are there tips that really help then maybe fill that, fill the home, fill the vacancy? I mean, if you decide that, yeah, okay, I read the 50 pages, I'm on board with that, I get it, I'm going to go do it. I mean, what are some tips that you have then to actually help people, I suppose, be a landlord rather than just a vacant property owner?
Well, the first tip is understanding your marketplace. So you can go online and find out what the rental range is pretty easily, especially in this area. And so let's say the rents are ranging for a similar home as yours between $1,500 to $1,800 a month. We would always recommend staying on the lower end of that because you're going to rent it out faster and you typically will get a better tenant. If you're pushing the higher end of that range, it's going to sit longer. And again, every day it's vacant, it costs you money. So it's not like selling a home.
Well, and I think that's a really big point, because if you're trying to get that extra $100 or $200 a month, it may only take 15 days of vacancy to eat up all that money.
Exactly.
So it's really important to price it right.
It is. So understanding the market, I'd say start on the lower end of that range, and you're going to get it rented quickly. And then the next step is
so there's some element of not being greedy.
Yes. Well, it's not necessarily greedy. It's just being smarter about having a good tenant in there, that somebody that we've found people that push the higher end of that market range maybe have had some credit issues, so they're willing to pay a little more, or maybe they have a roommate, or maybe it's just a little messier deal. So the folks that are on the lower end of that, they can demand a better deal. Mm-hmm. And because they maybe have great credit, good job history, mm-hmm. and nothing in their past that would want you to not have them as a tenant. So those are the people that you want in there because they're going to cause you less problems and cause you less money in the long run.
Geoff Lakman joins us, owner of Lakeshore Corporation, discussing some tips for first-time landlords. We have just a couple minutes left before we have to go to break. Outside of pricing and the law, are there any key places that you would say, how do you go find the tenants? I mean, is there any, great ways to do that?
Well, if you're on your own, Craigslist is probably the best way, to be honest with you.
It's just really simple.
Simple as
everybody looks at Craigslist, don't they, if they're going to rent something?
They do, yeah. And if you're using an agent, most likely they'll put it on the multiple listing service. And Seattle Times, there's a lot of different
people who still read the classifieds in the Seattle Times.
They have actually an online section, so you can go there. Hot Pads is another one. There's a lot of little websites out there that post rentals.
But if you were to pick one,
Craigslist by far.
Because I would think that just about everybody who went to all these other small ones is probably going to Craigslist. I mean, there's a good chance.
Yeah, Craigslist by far.
And it's like $25 now or something.
It's free to post a rental ad.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's funny. Craigslist all of a sudden realized they can start charging for things.
They do charge for employment ads.
They charge for employment ads, and I think they charge for rentals in like San Francisco and New York or something.
Really?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. We'll have to figure that stuff out. Geoff, thanks so much for joining us. We do have to go to break. Again, Geoff Lakman with Lakeshore Corporation. For all of you potential landlords out there, hey, it's only 50 pages of laws. Go out and read it. We'll be right back after this break.